3 minutes to showtime. 3 minutes to showtime. Two minutes to showtime. One minute to showtime.
Is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. And this is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away.
And greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live From an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains, through the America Free Radio studios on Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. So glad that you could be with us here tonight. We have a ton of news to go over. Thank you so much, Moverling, for the opening contribution. He's got a family barbecue tonight, so we're going to miss his pontification in the chat room. What do you mean, Colleen? You love it when I do what? When I do what? When I do the fist punch right there on the opening music? Yeah, I like that too. That's one of my favorite parts. I like the bumper music. Some guy in a black helicopter shot me in the Eric, I can't read that on the air. Come on. All right, listen, we got a lot of news to go over tonight, and I want to prepare you for this. It's a very short 2 hours tonight, and there's a lot to go over because we're going to give a war update tonight. The conflict with the CCP, it appears, is beginning to escalate. I've been trying to keep you abreast of the battlefield conditions for the war. From a high altitude, here's what's going on, okay, from 30,000 feet. It takes a while to get all these pieces put together, but I spent a few days doing this, and it should come out pretty well. The global syndicate has four main forces, okay? Four main forces. The CCP is the military arm of the global syndicate. Its technology has become greatly improved through the theft and acquisition of American technology through graft, bribery, and espionage on a scale that only a few can comprehend. The sales of American missile technology by Bill and Hillary Clinton advanced the CCP space program 20 years, while compromising world peace significantly. Not to worry, it made the Clintons rich and secured the White House for the global syndicate's most powerful crime family. Yes, and Greenhard made a mention, by the way, in the chat room, that he searched for the show using the filter live. When your show is live, it does not appear on YouTube's listing of live shows. Shadow banned. Very well could be. Could be that, we don't have very many, we don't have a big following here. We have, 8,000 subscribers, and according to my statistics, about 39% of the people that tune in each week have their notifications turned on. That means 61% of you have to search it out somehow. You have it speed dialed or on favorites or something. It's so much easier if you just click that little notification bell. If you do that, then it will notify you as soon as it goes live. Now, I don't do what a lot of hosts do. I don't go live an hour before the program. Sometimes they go live an hour before the program, or YouTube has a way of scheduling it so you can go live on YouTube. It'll send the notifications out, and then they have to wait out there for an hour for you to go live. I don't do that either. I go live about 3 minutes before showtime. I do send out the link about a half hour to an hour before the program on all social media. It's all the same. It's at Brooks Agnew everywhere, from We Go One all the way to Twitter and everything in between. Trust me, it all goes out. However, I will say about 40% of my traffic comes from Facebook. Why? I have no idea. It should be coming from other sources. Sometimes it comes from Gaia TV, which, by the way, Sunday I was back out at Gaia TV filming another episode of Beyond Belief with George Norrie. That should be out in about 2 or 3 weeks. I will let you know. That makes 4 episodes in the can with them. All right, the second thing about the CCP is it infiltrated every major U.S. university with CCP agents and scientists to learn every science to the fullest degree and then to return to China with those secrets. The CCP also donated billions of dollars to universities to gain access to their priceless databases of new technologies that had not even been patented yet in every field from biochemistry to space technology. Through a bold and uncompromising technology transfer process, the CCP acquired the technology of every single American company that has contracted them to manufacture their products. The relocation of entire industries from America to China has left America unable to manufacture essential products such as electric motors, microchips, drugs, non-woven fiber webs, electronics, batteries, and large tooling such as metal fabrication and injection molds for aluminum, steel, and plastic. The firmware backdoor programmed into every microchip made in China allows the CCP to monitor, track, and manipulate everything from cars, planes, missiles, and spacecraft that are made from those chips. That is the military arm of the global syndicate. Now, there is a media arm, the global media empire. It is run by 6 major owners that control 100% of the cable, satellite, broadcast, and print media, including movies, books, music, newspaper, and all manner of video programming on all channels 24 hours a day. There are also 4 major tech owners and control virtually all search browsers, social media, video content hosting services, and online advertising platforms. The net worth of these 4 companies combined exceeds all but the richest 7 countries. It is a conglomerate whose combined force is greater than any fascist propaganda machine the world has ever known. They have boldly announced that they are 100% dedicated and darkly consecrated to the destruction of America by using their resources to remove President Trump from office by any means necessary. That is the global media empire. The third arm of the global syndicate is the political arm. The political arm of the global syndicate is the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party consists of an eye single to the glory of Lucifer. The DNC has been dedicated since its founding in 1848 to the division and destruction of the United States of America, and is focused on creating a small number of regions out of North America to marry with the European Union and the CCP into a single world order of oppression and domination. The DNC will use any means necessary, including murder, bribery, blackmail, intimidation, propaganda, and malicious prosecution to destroy their enemies, the armed American. The fourth arm of the global syndicate is the World Bank, the IMF, and the Silk Road. They have systematically invaded and seized all financial assets of nearly every country on earth. The leaders who will not turn over their banking systems by signing the charter are summarily assassinated. They have financed every major world war for more than 244 years. President Trump has agreed to accept the calling to save the world from the global syndicate. He is taking effective action on all fronts, all at once. He will keep you informed I will keep you informed as much as I can. Sorry, I had to answer someone back there with a text. I'll keep you informed as much as I can with only 5 hours a week. If I could figure out a way to get my overhead low enough, I may be able to dedicate more time to the fight to protect you from becoming a victim of this war. And make no mistake, we have been at war since January of 2017. One of the casualties in this war is the Chinese consulate, which was closed a few hours ago, maybe it was yesterday, in Houston. The Chinese government on Wednesday, that was today, threatened retaliatory countermeasures after U.S. officials abruptly ordered the closure of Beijing's consulate in Houston. A lot of people are wondering, why did he do that? What's he trying to do? He's just trying to aggravate everybody. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said the Trump administration ordered the closure in an unprecedented escalation and promised to react with firm countermeasures if the move is not rescinded. That's not very likely, Mr. Wang. The ministry called the closure a political provocation unilaterally launched by the U.S. side, which seriously violates international law, basic norms governing international relations, and the bilateral consular agreement between China and the U.S. It also accused the Trump administration of stigmatizing an unwarranted attacks against China's social system. Really? Their social system? Tell me more. Harassing Chinese diplomatic and consular staff, intimidating and interrogating Chinese students, and confiscating their personal electrical devices, even detaining them without cause. State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus, traveling with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Denmark, said the closure was ordered to, quote, protect American intellectual property and Americans' private information, close quote. The United States will not tolerate China's violations of our sovereignty and intimidation of our people, just as we have not tolerated its unfair trade practices, theft of American jobs, and other egregious behavior, she said. President Trump insists on fairness and reciprocity in the U.S.-China relations. The move to close the consulate escalates tensions already somewhat strained by blame over the COVID-19 pandemic, trade disputes, and Beijing's military actions in the South China Sea. Possible countermeasures may include shutting down the U.S. consulate in general in Hong Kong, a Chinese academic told the Communist Party-run Global Times newspaper. Let's see, I have a quote here. China strongly condemns such an outrageous and unjustified move which will sabotage China-U.S. relations. That was the foreign ministry. That's what he said in a statement posted to social media. That's how they do diplomatic communications now. They tweet to each other. I continue with the quote. We urge the U.S. to immediately withdraw its erroneous decision, otherwise China will make legitimate and necessary reactions, close quote. Well, last night, authorities in Houston responded to a fire at the consulate, where witnesses saw papers being burned outside the facility. The closure came ahead of a Senate Foreign Relations Committee meeting on Wednesday today. It will examine U.S.-China relations. The hearing will include testimony from Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Beijing, Senator Marco Rubio lauded the closure, tweeting, and I quote, China's Houston consulate is a massive spy center. Forcing it to close is long overdue, close quote. Easy for him to say, as it was in Texas and Marco Rubio's in Florida. By the way, within hours of the notice being issued, a fire was started at the Consulate General of China in Houston, Texas. Police said they received reports that documents were being burned. They sent a crew over there, and the fire and police were denied entry. Nothing to see here. Move along, move along. Now you have to ask yourself the question, was it smart to close the consulate? I say it was. The next question would be, what are the ramifications? If you close it down, we really can't monitor what's going on, because I guarantee you every square inch of that place is probably monitored. Every word that's said in there, everything that's flushed is known in that building. So you don't really have access to that. But I will say, for a long time, the Chinese have been operating a program called EB-5. EB-5 is like H-1, visas. The EB-5 program was where American companies starved for capital. I don't mean lending capital. I mean equity capital, like we got a company that needs $5 million in equity. And if they get that equity, they can get a $5 million equity investor to match that. That's $10 million. With that $10 million, they can go to the Department of Energy and they get a loan. You see how all that works. That's just the cart before, or the horse before the cart. It just pulls the cart along. And this comes from China. Why would China do that? Why would China come over here and give $5 million to a U.S. corporation? The answer is very simple. It's the EB-5 program. The EB-5 program goes like this. China will give you $5 million to start up your business. I mean, generally just like throwing it up a horse's ass, okay? Give you $5 million. The only strings are that you will hire their hand-picked Chinese nationals for your company. Oh, they'll be smart. They'll be bookkeepers. They'll be accountants. They'll be even engineers. But these are individuals that normally would have to wait in line or may not be able to get in line at all to get a green card in the United States. But the EB-5 program allows them to do this. And China has been able to get top-notch Chinese nationals into the United States, get a green card, which is a big deal, a big deal to get a green card. It's one thing to come over here on a work visa. It's another to get a green card. To get a green card and be working in the United States of America with a company that the Chinese helped finance. It's a big deal. That's the EB-5 program. Now, you think to yourself, what does that have to do with me? Well, it all has to do with corruption. It all has to do with this global syndicate. Remember, we're talking about the global syndicate has a very powerful genealogy in it. And one of the pieces of genealogy, of course, are the Clintons. The EB-5 program was handled by very few companies, very few finance companies here in this country. One of them was a company called Gulf States Capital. Gulf States Capital is located in Gulfport, Mississippi. And the person that runs Gulf States Capital, owns it, is none other than Hugh Rodham. That was Hillary's brother. Yeah, Hillary's brother was running Gulf States Capital, and Gulf States Capital handled about 75% of the EB-5 money that came into the United States. That's a lot of money. That's millions and millions of dollars. Oh, but there was somebody else working as an officer at that corporation. Yep. Do you remember Hurricane Katrina? Oh, who can forget, right? Well, can you remember the scandal that occurred when George Bush Jr. sent the Red Cross down to New Orleans, and they were stopped outside the state and were not allowed to bring that aid into the city because the mayor and the governor decided, if you bring that aid here in the city, you say you set it up at the Superdome, what's going to happen is all those people that were wiped out from that hurricane, namely in the Ninth Ward, which nobody wanted the people from the Ninth Ward. It was if God was going to give the world an enema, they'd be very close to where he would stick the nipple. It was a bad place. Drugs, prostitution. It was a place cops did not like to go, for sure. If they got a call there, they just went somewhere else. It was a bad place. It was worse than Chicago. Lots of shootings, lots of drugs, lots of criminal gang activity. Hurricane Katrina cleaned the Ninth Ward off to the slab. I mean, destroyed everything. Those people were then refugees. Had that aid been put into the Superdome, those refugees would have gone in there, and they would have never been able to get rid of them. So the governor and the mayor said, you keep your aid out of our city. And they got buses in there, and they bussed those people all over the country. We saw a lot of those refugees in Dallas when they arrived. They took over the whole hotel and just about trashed the place in 6 weeks. It was like you had to be there. It was just awful. Anyway, the bottom line is this. All this is tied together. All this thing with the EB-5, with the Chinese consulate, with the Clintons, with Gulf States Capital, it's all tied together anytime there's a lot of money being given away by the Chinese, there's somebody there, usually with the last name Clinton, that's scooping money off the table to make themselves rich. This is how the global syndicate operates. The global syndicate doesn't play around. They deal in blackmail. They deal in human trafficking. The Chinese, the CCP has shipped deadly fentanyl into our country, human captors into our country. They have shipped counterfeit cash into our country. They have shipped a deadly coronavirus into our country, which fortunately has gone through enough generations now it's probably not so deadly. We're finally coming to herd immunity. It's not having as much impact as it had, say, a year ago or even 6 months ago. And they're also shipping parts for automatic weapons into this country. They just intercepted enough drop-in sea releases. I don't have one, but a sea release is for a semi-automatic weapon. When you pull the trigger, the firing pin goes forward, hits the shell recoils, which pushes the slide back. When it does, the ejector throws the brass out. The slide then springs forward, catching another bullet, loads it up into the chamber, and stops. Because the sea release won't ratchet. It won't click until you let go of the trigger and then pull it again. So that way, every single time you pull the trigger, as fast as you can pull the trigger, that's how fast the gun will shoot. Well, the drop-in sea release adapter, it has a pawl on it, a little tab on it. And when you rotate it into a certain position, when you pull that trigger, that slide will fire 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 like that. If you rotate it one more step, it will fire until the entire clip is empty, if you can hold on to the gun. Now, if it's a .223, it's not all that hard to hold on to. For a guy my size, I can hold a .223 all day long and shoot it. It's almost recoilless. For bigger rounds like AK-47 that shoots a .308, or even bigger guns that shoot 30-06 semi-automatic, that's a big bore, and it's a big recoil, and it's hard to hold on to. Very hard to shoot full automatic. That's why when you go up to that 30 caliber range, it usually goes to what's called the M60. An M60 uses thumb switches instead of triggers. You push the thumb switches for it, and the gun is heavy enough. It weighs about 22 pounds. It's able to take that recoil and be able to fire in full automatic. That doesn't mean you could just lay down on it and shoot a whole belt full of 30-06. It doesn't work that way because the barrels will get very hot. Unless you're flying through a helicopter with air going over the barrel will end up warping and you won't hit the broadside of a barn. So you fire it in bursts and let the barrel cool off. It's just the nature of the beast. The point is, those sea releases were shipped into this country. Why? Because you can take an ordinary AR-15. You can pull the pin out. You can take the receiver out. You can slide that sea release in. It's called the drop-in. And you can put the receiver back in the gun, and you now have a full automatic weapon. It doesn't take 5 minutes to do it, if that. Once you learn how to get that receiver out of the gun, it's pretty quick. Just a little gunsmithing information for you. I know, before Google, I am, but that's the way it is. So the bottom line is this. The CCP has been working to destabilize America on a lot of levels. We're going to cover some of those levels tonight. One of those ways that the global syndicate works is blackmail. And I mean high-level blackmail. What do they usually blackmail high-end politicians with? The chat room's a little slow. I'll give you the answer. It would be pedophilia. It's one of the gateways into serving the global syndicate. If you get a job, and you got a powerful job, you control a budget, you control legislation, you control or influence judgments of some kind, oftentimes they will invite you to little old Epstein's Island, and you're probably going to meet a little girl that probably ain't exactly legal. I mean, it's perfectly legal on Epstein's Island because that's a foreign country. But the bottom line is, once you get your picture taken, once you get your little video taken with your little 13-year-old, your career, oh, no, it's not over. Oh, no. Your career is just beginning. You're going to go high places and do great things, but your career belongs to them. Your career belongs to them. And what happens when something threatens to expose that? I don't mean they're going to lose their ability to blackmail. You can always put that together. I mean the people that are being blackmailed. Very powerful people. Judges, senators, governors, bureaucrats, rulers of other countries, princes, sultans, lots of powerful people. Even members of the royal family. Well, as it turns out, Sunday night, a couple of days ago, an assassination occurred. Yes, and it was about 5 o'clock Eastern time. The husband and son of a New Jersey federal judge were shot at their home Sunday afternoon, and a massive law enforcement response was underway instantly. A gunman disguised as a FedEx driver shot Judge Esther Salas's spouse, her husband, and her 20-year-old son at their North Brunswick home about 5 p.m. The 20-year-old son is dead. I don't even know how painful that is. I have 2 sons, and I would die if this happened to them. The father is still in critical condition. The husband answered the door when the disguised gunman rang the doorbell to ask for a signature for a delivery. The gunman instantly opened fire, shot multiple times, hitting the father numerous times. The son came running to the rescue and was shot dead before the gunman fled. Judge Salas was believed to be in the basement at the time of the shooting. Salas has reportedly received threats from time to time, but local press reported that Salas hadn't received any threats recently. Thank you very much, Jeremiah, for the contribution. Thank you very much. What is this? Cameron Galley told Carrie Cassidy that to work for the Illuminati you had to kill something he thought Taylor Swift had. It's called getting made, Eric. There are several ways to do this. You can kill somebody, that's for sure a way to get made, but it's usually a way of proving your loyalty. They don't necessarily blackmail you with it because usually it's somebody insignificant. For an assassination like this is a very high end. This is a marker. This is probably somebody that's conditioned, maybe through MK Ultra, prepared for a long time and then sent on a mission. They're promised, like, should you accept this, this message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. You know what I'm talking about. Well, seated in Newark, Salas's most high-profile cases recently included the tax evasion prosecution of Joe Judas, the husband of RHNJ star Teresa Giudice. She also spared a murderous gang leader from the death penalty over what she ruled was an intellectual disability that made him ineligible for capital punishment. But 4 days before the assassination attempt, maybe, Danny, maybe a pro hitman. Hang on a second. You're getting a little bit past me there, Danny. Just hold on. Salas was assigned to preside over an ongoing lawsuit brought by Deutsche Bank, their investors, who claim the company made false and misleading statements about its AML policy while failing to monitor high-risk customers like Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. Since the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, public interest in all things Epstein has been revived. So the bank said, hey, why didn't you cover this high risk? Why did you take such a risk with this guy? Well, she is the first Hispanic woman to serve on the federal bench in New Jersey. Her husband, Mark, is a well-regarded criminal defense attorney. Great family, hardworking, living in New Jersey. She gets assigned by rotation a case dealing with a federal financial case that has to do with Deutsche Bank that would have revealed something to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, you have to understand the way federal cases work. They take a while because each side gets to file what's called interrogatories. If you ever read the rules of the court, it's actually quite fascinating. It's a big, thick book about this thick. But the rules of the federal court are the same everywhere. There's state federal and there's federal, and one's a blue book and one's a brown book, and I've read them both, and they're very interesting. And once you learn the rules of the court, you can become quite adept, and you can put a big burden on the other party, and one of the burdens is discovery. I want to see your files, and you have to pay to print them up and deliver them to me in duplicate, and I want all the payroll records, and I want to know where all the deposits came from, and you know what's going on here, right? Discovery, when you're talking about Epstein, sooner or later, you're going to figure out why Jeffrey Epstein was a billionaire. Why was Jeffrey Epstein a billionaire? My God, why was Jeffrey Epstein a billionaire? He didn't sell anything. He didn't build anything. He didn't invest in anything. He didn't inherit anything. I could see being a millionaire, even a multimillionaire. A billionaire? How did it happen? The records were in Deutsche Bank, and they would have been revealed in discovery, and they couldn't allow that to happen. So they went after him. Well, a short while after the assassination, the gunman fled North Brunswick, where the assassination took place, and he arrived in Liberty, New Jersey, a short ways away, where I suppose he was to rendezvous for his payment for the assassination and receive a new identity with which to leave the country. He was instead shot and killed in his car, in his FedEx uniform. This is textbook gangland cleanup of a targeted assassination. The global syndicate rarely leaves loose ends. You should know that if you've read Charm of Favor, or if you have followed the Clintons for any period of time. You should have stepped on the Clinton blood trail numerous times. They typically will assassinate the assassin within a few minutes of the contract killing being completed or attempted. So what's going on? Why is this skullduggery happening? Why is this all involved the way it is? Why does it keep expanding and expanding? Why are you tuned in to X Squared Radio on America Free Radio Network? Because you need to know, and you have to have these pieces put together by great analysts and great investigators like me. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the Battle of Portland. Yes, the Battle of Portland. Now, a number of you have shown concern about uniformed U.S. Marshals that have been serving warrants and apprehending enemy combatants off the streets of Portland in recent days. Oh, the rhetoric has been something else, using words like kidnapping and stormtroopers and on and on and on. I mean, just, I know you're hearing it. I know you are. You probably heard it, in the break, at the news break in the last hour. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to hear that. But I have gone through a long list of those people that have been arrested and confirmed that each and every one of them was armed and had more than once assaulted federal officers and civilians and been filmed destroying federal property. They had been tracked over several dates, sometimes several states. They'd been filmed, recorded, and their contacts and sources of money and support have been investigated as well. They were in the uniform of an enemy force known as the OFA, Organizing for Action, which is a nonprofit, a 501c4. I know you always hear 501c3, right? A 501c4 means that you do not have to reveal who is donating money to you. You can get money from anybody. You could get money from Epstein. You could get money from Soros. You could even get money from the Democrat Party, and you wouldn't have to reveal it. Very convenient, isn't it? By the way, it was formed in 2013 while Obama was still president, and yes, he was heading it up. And yes, he did have an interview where he said the OFA is fully funded. How can it be fully funded? You haven't even had a fundraiser. Exactly right. So the OFA uses armies under the name of BLM and Antifa, among others, as mercenaries to commit felonies. Now, Antifa is a company out of the Netherlands. Yes, it is an organization as old and older than Nazis themselves. It is out of the Netherlands, and these are very dark and very nasty forces. Our friends in Donetsk is in the Ukraine, and they have faced these guys numerous times, and they often are carrying light to medium weaponry on the streets. Now, I want to cover a couple of aspects of this so I can refute the accusations of wrongdoing of law enforcement. Number one, the intimidation and the assassination of family members of Judge Salas by assassinating her son and shooting of her husband in their home is an example of what I'm talking about. Once the identity of a person fighting the global syndicate is discovered, they are targeted for violence. Number two, these tactics are so well regarded, so well documented, that the identity of U.S. Marshals and deputies working across various cities to apprehend enemy combatants, and I don't mean lawbreakers, I don't mean peaceful protesters, I don't mean vandals, I'm talking about enemy combatants. They have put the uniform of a terror organization on, and they have attacked and in some cases killed police and civilians as an act of war. They wear uniforms. Okay, these law enforcement agencies are law enforcement individuals. They wear uniforms, and they have muted insignia, little tiny insignia. You cannot see it with a cell phone unless you get very, very close to it. It's not surprising. It's not surprising at all. Same thing is done in Afghanistan. Same thing is done in Iran and Iraq, because if the insignia or the name or the unit is discovered, all they need is a face to go with it, and they can track it right to your family all the way back in the United States, and they can go to your house and they can assassinate your family. And it has happened. It has already happened. It just happened to a judge. So they wear uniforms that have muted insignia, badges, and name tags, and they must obscure their faces so they cannot be identified in any way. The facial recognition technology is so good now that the deputies' families can be targeted for violence within hours of the deputy's face being posted on social media. They have been recruited and sworn to silence while they serve thousands of warrants for terrorists and soldiers of the OFA and their armies, the BLM and Antifa forces attacking federal property and American civilians. Not even the vehicle is traceable, as the global syndicate has soldiers in every walk of government. They have lawyers, they have mayors, they have governors, and they have a large number of legislators that are known to be traitorous members of the global syndicate. Like Judge Salas, each officer's family is a target for the global syndicate. These U.S. Marshals are not arresting large numbers of people. They're doing it one at a time. In most cases, they are defending federal property and their own lives when in conflict or on the streets. They are tracking and apprehending primarily certain individuals who work for terror organizations who have openly declared themselves to be enemies of the state, such as OFA, BLM, or Antifa. Prosecutors have video, they have financial transactions, they have texts, emails, and recorded phone calls where they have committed acts of aggression against America and engaged in combatant activities. They are being targeted, they're being tracked from city to city until they are positively located, and then they are apprehended by the U.S. Marshals. I want to make sure you understand the authority behind this. I know there have been various TV judges who have told you otherwise, but they are wrong and I am right. I have the facts to back it up. Everything changes once you come to terms with the facts that we are at war and that this war is no longer cold, it is hot. The first, second, and third shots have been fired, and hundreds of thousands of people have already been killed, and billions of dollars worth of property has been destroyed. You must realize that there is a bomb in play, and that this must be disarmed before the losses are too great to imagine. Now let me continue. The Supremacy Clause is in effect here. And newly and specially deputized U.S. Marshals are following President Trump's executive order to arrest and try enemy combatants. Neither mayors nor governors have the authority to stop these arrests. State officials cannot be trusted with the identification of the U.S. Marshals, as now we have proof that many of these government officials, including mayors and governors, are suspected of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, wanton endangerment, bribery, money laundering, and violations of the Espionage Act. Since this last weekend, the speakers of the houses of both Ohio and Illinois have been targeted by the FBI on charges of bribery and corruption. The governor or the Speaker of Ohio has already been arrested while he was in service, while he was on the floor. Numerous former Obama administration officials have been arrested on corruption and violation of the Espionage Act. Matthew Borges, a lobbyist and former chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, was arrested in connection to a year-long $60 million federal bribery scheme. According to prosecutors, Borges and three other lobbyists allegedly conspired with the Republican Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives to secure a $1.3 billion taxpayer bailout for an Ohio-based energy company, First Energy Solutions. Borges joined with former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, you know who the Mooch is, don't you, in launching a new nonprofit called Right Side PAC, Political Action Committee. The Super PAC was formed with the intention of identifying GOP voters that backed Trump in 2016, but because of dissatisfaction with the president, might be open to voting for Joe Biden in November. That's who they were looking for. Dissatisfied Trump voters. A grand jury in Spokane, Washington, returned an indictment earlier this month charging two hackers, both nationals and residents of the CCP, with hacking into the computer systems of hundreds of victim companies, governments, non-governmental organizations, we call them NGOs, and individual dissidents, which might be in Hong Kong or might be in Wuhan, China. Also, clergy and Democrat and human rights activists in the United States and abroad, including Hong Kong and China. The defendants in some instances acted for their own personal financial gain and in others for the benefit of the Chinese government. The hackers stole terabytes of data, which comprised a sophisticated and prolific threat to U.S. networks. All this ties together. The president has the express authority and the duty to perform these arrests with federal officers and deputies. How do I know that? Let me read to you Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution. I'm going to emphasize part of it. And I quote, "He shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union, recommend their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them, and in cases of disagreement between them with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he think proper." Now, let me emphasize, he shall receive ambassadors and other ministers. He shall, not he might, he should. No, he shall take care. This is known as the take care clause. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, and shall commission all the officers of the United States. Boom. The Department of Homeland Security, Federal Protective Service, through 40 U.S.C. Section 1315, has the responsibility to, and I quote, protect the buildings, grounds, and property that are owned, occupied, or secured by the federal government. The federal government is the largest landowner in the country, and persons on the property, close quote. The federal Enclave laws provide two forms of protection to property found on federal land. At the outset, these laws specifically forbid certain property crimes. For example, arson, theft, receiving stolen goods, destruction of property, robbery, blah, blah, blah. All that's in there, right? An enemy combatant may not attack federal personnel or property and simply run across the street to avoid arrest across the street. That's what they film. They don't film the attack on the federal property. What they film is the marshals crossing the street and arresting the person on the sidewalk. As the video says, I didn't do nothing wrong. I didn't do nothing wrong. They wouldn't be there if you didn't do something wrong. They witnessed it. So what is an enemy combatant? A lot of you are asking that. I understand that. I can see that. Any reporter would ask that question. An enemy combatant is a person who either lawfully or unlawfully engages in hostilities for the other side in an armed conflict. That's pretty simple, isn't it? Usually, enemy combatants are members of the armed forces of the state with which another state is at war. Unlawful combatants are likewise subject to capture and detention. But in addition, they are subject to, and this is very important to understand, they are subject to trial and punishment by military tribunals for acts which render their belligerency unlawful. The spy who secretly and without uniform passes the military lines of a belligerent in time of war, seeking to gather military information and communicate it to the enemy, or an enemy combatant who, without uniform, comes secretly through the lines for the purpose of waging war by destruction of life or property, are familiar examples of belligerents who are generally deemed not to be entitled to the status of prisoners of war, but to be offenders against the law of war, subject to trial and punishment by military tribunals. Now, all of these people that are arrested, they're all bad people. I've seen them. I've looked at their pictures. I've read their rap sheets. These are bad people, violent people, hardcore Marxists. Hardcore. I mean, really hardcore. Knives, clubs, drugs, Molotov cocktails. Unbelievable. Guess what? They've only been detained for about 2 hours. In that 2 hours, military tribunals are very quick. In that 2 hours, they read you your crime, they set for you a court date, and they release you with a warning. You will come back for this court date. We will find you if you don't show up, and it won't go well for you. Can you spell Gitmo? You will show up. Where does this come from? How do we get to here? Now, to be clear, these things were recently discussed in the most watched confirmation hearing in U.S. history. I'm going to connect another dot for you. You heard it. You just may not have known what you were hearing. I did. It's time to hear it again, this time with emphasis. Here's the transcript of the Lindsey Graham, Brett Kavanaugh question and answer during the confirmation hearing. Totally out of the blue. We were being blown away by Christine Blasey Ford, right? Her heart-touching story. The trained CIA liar trainer was up there pouring her heart out. And all of a sudden, this line of questioning from Lindsey Graham. Mr. Graham, so when somebody says, post 9/11, that we've been at war, and it's called the war on terrorism, do you generally agree with that concept? Kavanaugh. I do, Senator, because Congress passed the authorization for the use of military force, which is still in effect. That was passed, of course, on September 14, 2001, 3 days later. Lindsey Graham. Let's talk about the law and war. Is there a body of law called the law of armed conflict? Kavanaugh. There is such a body, Senator. Graham. A body of law that's called basic criminal law. Kavanaugh. Yes, Senator. Kavanaugh. Are there differences between those bodies of law? Kavanaugh. Yes, Senator. Graham. From an American citizen's point of view, do your constitutional rights follow you? You know, if you're in Paris, does the Fourth Amendment protect you as an American from your own government? Kavanaugh. From your own government? Yes. Graham. So, if you're in Afghanistan, do your constitutional rights protect you against your own government? Kavanaugh. If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government. Graham. Isn't there also a long-settled law that goes back to the Eisentrager case? I can't remember the name of it. Kavanaugh does. Johnson versus Eisentrager. Graham, right. That American citizens who collaborate with the enemy are considered enemy combatants, right? Kavanaugh. They can be. They're often sometimes criminally prosecuted, sometimes treated in the military. Graham. Well, let's talk about can be. I think there's a Supreme Court decision that says that American citizens who collaborated with Nazi saboteurs were tried by the military. Is that correct? That is correct, said Kavanaugh. Graham, I think a couple of them were executed. Kavanaugh, yes. Graham, importance. Listen closely. So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated differently. What's the name of the case, if you can recall, that reaffirmed the concept that you can hold one of our own as an enemy combatant if they were engaged in terrorist activities in, say, Afghanistan? Are you familiar with that case? Kavanaugh, yes. Hamdi versus Rumsfeld. Graham, so the bottom line is, on every American citizen, no, you have constitutional rights, but you do not have a constitutional right to collaborate with the enemy. There's a body of law well developed long before 9/11 that understood the difference between basic criminal law and the law of armed conflict. Do you understand those differences? Kavanaugh, I do understand that there are different bodies of law, of course, Senator. Now, I wanted you to hear that exchange because there's more to it that deals with the trial, the conviction, and the execution of enemy combatants, which are Americans who are fighting or have joined the enemy of America to fight against America. They are not arrested by police. They are not read the Miranda rights. They are not given an attorney and a trial by jury. It doesn't happen that way. They go to a military tribunal. That's different. They were in 2 hours. They received their sentence, or not their sentence, but their court date, and they will return to court. And then we will see what happens to these people. So, let's tie the next piece together. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. More X Squared Radio right after this.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound. I don't believe I'm seeing such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity. I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do? Bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. A black knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, by all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio! All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
By the way, thank you, Joe, for the generous contribution, and God bless you too, Sarah. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. Somebody asked a good question in the chat room while we were on break. Is BLM and Antifa enemy combatants? And the answer is yes, they are. So be very careful about playing in this game. You go out there and you be a human shield out there. You could get yourself hurt. You could get yourself photographed. I would definitely avoid being members of those two organizations. By the way, BLM does not have a business license. They do not have an IRS registration. And recently it was ruled by a federal judge that the founders of BLM can be personally sued. I know they've made hundreds of millions of dollars off you and your donations out there, but the founders of BLM can be personally sued by an injured police officer. This is just going to open the floodgates of lawsuits. So I don't think you're going to see BLM around much longer because it's going to become a financial millstone around their neck. All right, Democrat funders deny inconvenient science. Today's Democrat Party insists that a beautiful full-term human baby just about to be born isn't really a human being at all and therefore can be slaughtered at will, maybe even after he or she is born, just as long as the mother and her doctor agree. The Democrat Party's top leaders also passionately warn that the entire Earth will become uninhabitable within 10 years due to global warming, unless, that is, America goes full totalitarian socialist right now and adopts their Green New Deal at an estimated cost of $93 trillion. After all, it's settled science, right? The modern Democrat Party likewise contends there are more than 100 different genders that never before existed in history, and men can get pregnant and have babies and menstrual periods and much more. And that if you don't agree with all of this, you're a deplorable bigot and anti-science. These are the people who are proudly identifying themselves as the party of science and contemptuously dismiss critics and political opponents as science deniers or climate deniers, people who refuse to listen to the scientists and follow the data. Most recently, throughout the coronavirus pandemic, Democrat leaders and their media propagandists have played their "we listen to the scientists" card more brazenly than ever. By the way, I just got back from the state of Colorado this weekend. I went out there to film another episode of Beyond Belief with George Noory. And when I got off the plane, my phone, as soon as I turned it on, went into that crazy, tornado warning alarm. And there on my phone, there it was, a statewide mandate for a mask. Everywhere I went, people had a mask on their face. Of course, being a free American, I didn't have a mask on my face. So I went to the hotel. Of course, I was smiling at everybody as I checked in. I couldn't tell if they were smiling at me or not. But I carried my own bags up the stairs to my third-floor room. I next went out to dinner, no mask, sitting there on the sidewalk. I see a few people every now and then walk by. I would salute them if they were on the other side of the street or smile at them if they were on my side of the street if they weren't wearing a mask, because I could tell they were awake. They were awake. They could see what was going on. It was kind of crazy. We're all outside in the sunshine and the dry air, and we're afraid, so we're wearing the masks. They're wearing the masks. So the next day, I got up in the morning, had to film at 7:25, so I got up in the morning, hit the elevator there at 7 o'clock, and it was an older hotel that had a manually operated elevator, and the elevator man came, opened the door. I didn't have a mask on. He did. He said, "You have a mask?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Will you put it on?" I said, "Nope. I'm a big fan of oxygen." And he said, "Well, I'll take your bags, but you got to take the stairs." So he took my bags to the bottom floor, and I happily walked a free man down those stairs, gathered my bags, turned my keys in, went outside, and sat on the bench and waited for the ride. So you can and you must stand for freedom. Blue state governors, mayors, and public health officials have issued sweeping dictatorial orders. Thank you, Boo. $10. Very good. Thank you very much. That keeps the lights on. I don't have to have it, but it sure is nice, and it helps fund things that we need for the expedition. We're slowly accumulating the filming equipment that we need. We just finished a great camera rig. It's all ready to go. We're going to start filming some book trailers with it here this week, and hopefully they come out really well. We're going to film in 4K. It should be awesome. Anyway, He's sweeping dictatorial orders, quarantining the young and healthy inside their homes for extended periods, even putting ankle bracelets on them if they refuse to sign an agreement swearing that they will not travel anywhere. They just arrested him, put him under house arrest. It was crazy. Anyway, they allow the big box stores to sell beer and wine, but not paint and garden supplies, permitting beachgoers to walk on wet sand but not dry sand, allowing groups of 25 to meet in a restaurant, department store, or most any other venue. No gym is open, no church is open. It's science, you see. It's all in the data. Meanwhile, cable TV anchors and pundits posing as epidemiologists and immunologists, news actors, angrily denounce the drug hydroxychloroquine as extremely dangerous, even though the FDA has ruled it safe for the last half century. Why do they condemn a medication already being used effectively on COVID-19 patients everywhere? Because Donald J. Trump is who they hate. They detest him. They live to destroy him. Why? Not because they don't like Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. Donald Trump used to write some big checks. Donald Trump took pictures and shook hands and put them up at Mar-a-Lago and came to their boxing events and their wrestling events. They loved Donald Trump. They hate you. They hate you. And Donald Trump is standing in between them and you. And that's why they hate Donald Trump. Truth check. At the latest issue of most of the whistleblower-type magazines out there, there is no more unscientific, indeed anti-science political movement in American history than today's Democrat Party. Yes, it's true. All right, let's talk a little bit about insurrection and revolution. Insurrection is not revolution, okay? Let me just make this clear to you. Just a little bit of, what is this? Thank you for that mask story. I thank you very much, Colleen. I appreciate that. I will wear the mask at work because I have to, because it's the terms of employment. But once you're outside of that private establishment, know this: you cannot be refused service for not wearing a mask. That's a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And you have a disability. Sure you do. Sure you do. All you have to do is say, I have a medical condition. I've tried it. Believe me, I was just downtown the other day. Went to a meeting. Went to go in the building, and there's a sign about this big. Stop! If you pass this sign, you must have a mask on. Well, I opened the doors and walked in. And there was the little hostess, and she had her mask on. And she said, do you have a mask? I said, no, I don't. I can't wear one. I have a medical condition. Oh, okay. And off we went. And guess what? We got to our meeting and the table, nobody had masks on. You see, don't be intimidated by those signs. By the way, the fine, the ADA fine for refusing you service for not having a mask, $75,000. Oh, yeah. $75,000. It's a big deal, and it's a federal fine. All you have to do is find a lawyer willing to take it, and there are lots of lawyers willing to take this one. So there's a difference between insurrection and revolution. One is a means to the other, but when the means become the end, then there is something else occurring. Insurrection is a tool of wars and revolutions. The one thing that has kept America free for 400 years is not the army. It is not even its court system or the laws on the books. It is the armed American that has kept America free. No one knows what it will take to get 100 million armed Americans to step into the street and secure the nation. It has never happened before. The prospect of that happening has every nation in the world at bay, including our own. The global syndicate has been crafting a way to defeat the armed American in a serious way for more than 50 years. The strategy is to make them the enemy of the state. It has not worked so far, because those 100 million Americans up until recently have been the state. Never before in history have there been two revolutions going on at the same time. Oh yeah, two revolutions going on at the same time. Therefore, one is a revolution, and the other is the offensive designed to stop the revolution. Let me explain. It's not so tricky to understand, but this is what's going on. The entire world is filled with individual countries, and they've not thought of themselves that way in about 50 years. There were unions of one sort or another. There was ECOWAS, the Economic Council of West African States. There was the European Union. There was the South America. There was North America. And all those unions had been harpooned and were being hauled economically and politically into one union called the United Nations, called the New World Order. All that changed when President Trump gave his inaugural address. He said, this is not the peaceful transition of power from one party to another. This is the transfer of power from Washington, D.C. back to the American people. His America First agenda prioritized Americans, but it also enabled other individual nations to do the same thing. In fact, candidate Trump and President Trump praised Poland, Italy, Hungary, and even Saudi Arabia to break the bonds of the union that was extracting their wealth and enslaving their peoples. They believe the revolution against the global syndicate began then, narrowly missing the opportunity to seize the states for themselves once and for all in 2016. The global syndicate went stark, raving mad. They lost all control of their bowels. Within days, the streets were filled with raging pussies in pink hats or black uniforms with sticks and bicycle helmets. Then Obama's OFA mobilized and organized its army of 30,000 soldiers, all dressed in black and focused on ripping America apart. The BLM was advertised on every media, every hour of the day in 3 languages. They raised millions for the political army of the global syndicate, the Democrat Party. Within 3 years, they had recruited and contracted more than 52,000 street soldiers and set to work burning Americans out of their homes and small businesses. They followed the ancient game plan that has worked for millennia. It goes like this, according to my old college instructor, Cleon Skousen. I will focus on a few of the 45 points he mentioned in his best-selling book, The Naked Communist. Cleon is a great guy, Brother Skousen. 50 grandkids, 150 great-grandchildren. This guy is unbelievable. Now, there's 45 of these. I'm not going to read all 45. I'm going to concentrate on a few of them. Number 3. These are current communist goals out of his book, The Naked Communist. I highly recommend it. It's a bestseller, top 5 on Amazon in its class. Cleon Skousen. I will put it in the newsletter. If you have not signed up for the newsletter, it's so easy. So easy, and it's free. That means it don't cost nothing. You go to brooksagnew.com and you click on the newsletter link right there, or go to AmericaFreeRadio.com. Click on the newsletter button there. Either way, it'll get you to the same place. Sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get a copy of these notes every Wednesday, every Sunday, right after the program. Yeah, that's right. I'm with you, Zoe. I'm with you. Zoe Buttercup. Yeah, I'm with you. Exactly right. Yes. Good job, Eric. You said you had Joel's dad. Wow. Yes. Yes. All right. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations, regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items would be used for war. We saw that happen. Number 7, grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. Keep in mind, this book goes back a few years. There are some things that talk about Red China, that talk about the Soviet Union. Those things aren't really that way anymore. There's no Soviet Union. There's Russia. Russia is not involved the way it was in the past. Russia corroborates with us on a lot of things, science and space research and geology and all kinds of stuff. And Russia is not the Soviet Union. And Red China is now just the CCP. Number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Number 12, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Number 13, do away with loyalty oaths. You know, like, I do solemnly swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God. Where we go one, we go all. That's the oath, isn't it? I'm pretty sure that's the oath. I don't have it written down. I'm just going from memory here. I gave it once, and it still holds, okay? I gave it in 1973, and it still holds. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. For a long time, they had both. Now they only have one, but they're not going to let it go without a fight. Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Oh, looky here. Liquid agua. Gain control of all the newspapers. That's an easy one. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. Number 20, infiltrate the press. Really? That's a hard one, isn't it? Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. Number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. You forgot about us. You're never going to get us. Not going to happen. We're free Americans. Number 22, continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. Number 23, control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Number 26 goes along with this. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, I would say pedophilia, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Number 27, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Number 28, eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools, in the churches, on the ground that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. We're seeing that in the state of California right now. No singing, no praying, no going to church in a vocal way. Number 29, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. We heard Hillary Clinton say one day that the Constitution and all the amendments are dynamic, and they should be able to be edited by Congress. Can you believe that? Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, including child protection services, mental health clinics, etc. Skipping down, 35, discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. Number 36, infiltrate and gain control of more unions. Number 37, infiltrate and gain control of big business. 38, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. We just heard that. Just the other day. Defund the police. We'll send non-armed social workers out to solve domestic squabbles, right? Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders, which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. Let people out of jail. It's a mental disease, not a crime. Number 39, dominate the psychiatric profession and the use of mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals, including the Second Amendment. Number 40, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. And number 41, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. You got that? The negative influence of parents. Number 42, create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, peaceful protesters. That students and special interest groups should rise up, peaceful protesters, and use united force to solve economic, peaceful protesters, political, peaceful protesters, and social problems, mostly peaceful protesters. And that's all I want to cover of my old professor Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communist. In the early days of the communist insurrection, make no mistake about what we are facing. No mistake at all. Reasonable observers tried to distinguish between peaceful protesters and mobs of rioters engaged in vandalism, arson, looting, vicious attacks on property, including many black-owned businesses, shootings, and murder. Their confusion was compounded by surreal scenes of middle-class suburban white people kneeling en masse before Black Lives Matter activists and repeating in union vows to stop being racist. Whites shining the shoes and washing the feet of blacks, and even the formation of what amounted to entirely new nation states within America, most notably Spaz, Chaz, Chop. Spaz of Chaz, by the way, was arrested, cried like a little girl, Didn't have no gun then. But most bizarre and genuinely threatening has been the wholesale destruction of dozens of historic American memorials, starting with the Civil War era. Well, some thought maybe we shouldn't celebrate Civil War heroes of the Confederacy because they backed slavery. So they essentially approved the desecration of the nation's historical monuments. But then, city after city saw statues of Christopher Columbus being torn down, along with the America's founding fathers. They were going to go after Mount Rushmore, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Radicals in Portland, Oregon tore down a nearly 100-year-old George Washington statue and draped it with a burning American flag. The Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. was defaced. In San Francisco, the statue of Francis Scott Key, who wrote America's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, toppled. Still, some thought, these historical figures did own slaves, so while I don't agree at all with tearing down their statues, I can sort of understand the rage of the protesters, right? I mean, they're really mad about it. They're really upset about it. That delusion completely evaporated when wild mobs turned to attacking statues of Abraham Lincoln, who actually freed the slaves, signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and Ulysses S. Grant, the general and later president, who led the Union to victory over the Confederacy. And in Boston, rioters defaced the Shaw Memorial, a monument honoring the first all-volunteer black regiment of the Union Army in the Civil War. And in Madison, Wisconsin, they tore down a statue of Hans Christian, a revered abolitionist who died trying to end slavery. What's going on? What is going on? Why are they tearing down monuments to anti-slavery heroes? Sean King, co-founder of Real Justice Political Action Committee, has called for tearing down statues of Jesus Christ, along with all the murals and stained glass windows of white Jesus and his European mother and their white friends, insisting their very existence constitutes a form of white supremacy. By now, many Americans finally realized this sustained, violent campaign to destroy their country's culture, memorials, history, core religion was not about combating systemic racism at all. A deeper and much more disturbing reality was emerging, wasn't it? The Democrat Party, body and soul, is the political army for the global syndicate. It is using people of color and other minority groups as a cover for its true agenda. This includes the Communist Party USA, whose website, I'm not going to give it out, it's in my notes if you want it, is perpetually dominated by articles decrying things like police brutality, institutional racism in America. It's all pretext, Earth Explorers, all pretext. Their actual agenda is dismantling America's constitutional government and vital institutions. They want to eliminate free market capitalism, and they want to institute a totalitarian socialist system in America. No more private property. No more home ownership. Home ownership goes away. No more savings accounts, no more income. You don't earn your own income. You're given what the state thinks that you need, and you will show up to work every day in uniform. While the nation's police are reviled, mocked, and abused, over 700 have been injured, by the way, during the riots. Most Americans, you guys, you don't even realize the protests have been engineered and largely co-opted by mostly openly Marxist, communist, revolutionary groups, including Antifa and Black Lives Matter. By the way, socialism is just communism with fuzzy dice hanging from the mirror. Okay? All three co-founders of Black Lives Matter proudly admit that they are Marxists. BLM co-founder Patrice Cullors says on video, and I quote, "We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia are particularly trained organizers. We are trained Marxists," close quote. Recently, New York's BLM leader Hawk Newsom openly promised a violent revolution, telling Fox News' Martha McCallum, quote, "If this country doesn't give us what we want, then we will burn down the system and replace it," close quote. It's treason. It's sedition. It's insurrection. Antifa are the armed and dangerous soldiers of the OFA, Organizing for Action, which is Barack Obama's 501c4. They have been classified as a domestic terror group. They are swollen with communists and anarchists. Ironically, through the name Antifa, they look and act exactly like Mussolini's notorious black shirts. Mussolini was the world's most notorious fascist. Refuse Fascism, which has held rallies in Los Angeles, Cleveland, Chicago, Tulsa, elsewhere across the U.S., was actually formed by the Revolutionary Communist Party. It's actually led by open communists, and it is actually headquartered in the RCP's Revolution Bookstore in Harlem. What about the all-important November election? The Democrat Party is now an openly Marxist organization. They continually decry racism and police brutality. We already went through all of these things described by Cleon Skousen. Each primary candidate tries to outdo the other in expressing just how bigoted, predatory, immoral the country is. Bernie Sanders this, Kirsten Gillibrand that, Beto O'Rourke that. The country is upset about this. China Joe Biden declared that if you don't vote for his white butt, you ain't black. Give me a break, people. 2 generations of young Americans have been brainwashed in the Communist Manifesto in the nation's colleges and universities. The teachers' unions have made these activists not only the sole caretaker of your children's affiliated higher education, they have rendered themselves invulnerable to being fired for their insurrection against America. They cannot be fired. Do you understand that? Their unions are the most powerful political unions in the nation. No candidate dare cross them. The Republican governor of Kentucky was recently singled out for removal because he criticized the teachers union during his campaign. More than 22,000 ballots were voted entirely Republican, except they left the slot for governor blank. They didn't vote for anybody. Thus, it cost him and him alone a loss to a liberal Democrat with less than 30% of the vote. In elite universities, young people take on untenable debt to fund their education. Actually, the receipt of a diploma is absolutely no indication that the student learned anything other than the Communist Party drivel. They're living in a hermetically sealed cult-like environment, cut off from the outside world, where dissent is both discouraged and punishment. They are indoctrinated by radical Marxist, America-hating professors and rewarded for absorbing the far left's bizarre identity politics, social justice worldview. It is an absolute miracle if a graduating senior comes away with a positive view of the American flag. Higher education has been building young people into an army of angry, arrogant, historically ignorant, morally confused, America-hating foot soldiers. And now they have been called to active duty. The most frightening thing is that the global syndicate wants to have your children machine gunned down in broad daylight by federal troops so that they can further demonize the Constitution and destroy any hope of the revolution against them to enslave the world. That's what they want. And I'm trying to warn the kids not to go out there. Don't be the cannon fodder for this organization. They have done that before. In fact, every nation is rising up. Every nation is declaring its independence from the syndicate. While the people are revolting against the central power, the OFA is using its soldiers to burn down the stores in your neighborhood. The real question is, how do we stop the war before it really begins? That's the big question. Just looking in the chat room, some things that are said here. Trying to catch up with you guys. Defacing Grant's tomb would be gruesome. His sarcophagus is out there. Big Rick, dropped from the balcony, would do it. Yeah, I get it, Eric. Yeah, but they can't play us anymore. We are pushing back, babe. It's true. We are. We are pushing back. That's why we have radio programs like this, to keep you awake, keep you informed, keep you moving. UN is crap. Always has been. Nice one, William. Yeah, they don't have our best interests at hand, do they? And there are others that don't either. Who is afraid of wolf? You know which wolf I'm talking about, don't you? Following the shame and struggles you have placed upon the state, we ask that you save us further strife by resigning on your own accord. That was a letter. It was written by Metcalf to the administration of Virginia. Your further authoritarian dictates as of yesterday have only strengthened our resolve, said the letter in the Examiner. The legislature has been locked in a conflict with Governor Wolf over restrictions and business closures during the CCP virus, and the governor recently moved to tighten limitations on bars and restaurants, even though positive test results are only surging in the western area of the state near Pittsburgh, as the New York Times reported. Well, I know how to stop this nonsense. Stop the testing. If you're healthy and you have no symptoms, don't get tested. Don't get tested. There's no need to. Just stop the testing. Let them have their testing lines. Let people with symptoms go get tested. Don't get tested. That's what I'm saying. About 250,000 people every single day are cured of this virus. You don't believe me? Go to New York. Go ahead. Go to New York. You know what you're going to find? Nobody's dying. Infection rates are falling off a cliff. You know why? Because they live on top of one another there, and everybody caught it. Everybody's immune. Herd immunity has already happened in New York City. The virus has run its course. It spread so fast, it ran its course in less than 6 months. And it will do that everywhere it goes. Stop the testing, and this will go away. I would call it a prelude to war, but it is already here, isn't it? It's spread everywhere. The propaganda is in every home. The giant block letters of surrender are already rolled onto the streets of dozens of major American cities. You've seen them. Whose mayors have given up territories without a fight, and certainly without a vote from the people they represent. Churchill, the great lion of the 20th century, understood that if the Nazis won, they would usher in a period of unparalleled darkness. But thank God, he said, Christian civilization won. Close quote. Fast forward to the summer of 2020 when Marxists desecrated a statue of Churchill. They spray-painted anti-law enforcement graffiti on his statue. They likely would have torn it down if they hadn't been stopped. There's a war on Western civilization, and every week seems to bring new examples of this war. It is not enough that the failed theory of Marxism has ushered in the deaths of tens of millions of human beings just in the 20th century, people. Just in the 20th century. Marxism has once again propagated itself in many of our schools. The teachers' union and tenure and the lack of victory over this cancer in America has given them sole custody over 2 generations of children. The violent, destructive protesters who are making mayhem in our streets, demanding justice, are the Marxists, built grade by grade out of American children. The New York Times last week, as part of this woke culture, now has classical music in their crosshairs. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Mozart. Citizens Free Press, July 18th, writes that the Times launched a full-out assault on classical music, hoisting race theory onto composers who had been dead for centuries. They wore white wigs. White people composed and played that music. It's obviously racist. In several opinion pieces published this week, the New York Times said operas should be re-examined for racism. Yes, it's white music. Classical music, yeah. Music, mathematics, home ownership, student loans, and even the American nuclear family are all on the altar for sacrifice to the Marxist god of the state. Their soldiers take great joy in inflicting pain, breaking glass, starting fires, and beating innocent people with clubs and pipes. The OFA's concerted attacks seem to be aimed at unraveling the very fabric of civilization. This is the core of the transformative power preached by Barack Obama for over a decade. There are different vital proteins, as it were, that make up Western civilization. Certainly, ancient Greece played a major part. Even more anciently, the Freemasons laid the foundation for our talismans that form our architecture and our system of commerce, including the alchemy of turning worthless paper into currency that is trusted around the world as the most valuable and sought after in world history. But the single most important element is the Judeo-Christian tradition. Perhaps this explains why right now, during this time, as darkness descends upon us, there are various attacks against churches and statues of Jesus and his mother. Just on Saturday, this last week, in Chantilly, Virginia, a young man barged into a church and he stabbed the pastor who was leading a Bible study. Thankfully, a policeman attending the study prevented the stabbing from being fatal. But this didn't even seem to make the news. One of the main fronts of the war is on churches and religion itself. I could go on and on and on about this, but it sounds like the minions of activist Shaun King are doing his bidding. He said that in the interest of social justice, statues of Jesus and Mary should be torn down if they look too white. The war against Western civilization can be seen in the war against Christopher Columbus. John Eidsmoe, the great scholar on American history, law professor, author, once made this remark about the attack on Western civilization. And I quote, "Let us credit them for its Western culture's achievements and contributions, art, music, architecture, ethics, liberty law, government, a constitution that has served as a model across the world, an economic system that has produced the greatest good for the greatest number and the highest level of prosperity the world has ever known, and a spirit of ingenuity and achievement that has led to unparalleled medical and technological advances." Close quote. The war is no longer cold, Earth explorers. For some, it is a little more than a frustrating entertainment. For others, it has gone hot, and it is traumatic to watch your family members gunned down in your own home or neighborhood. Our own government is infected in almost every state. Law enforcement has been ordered to let us burn or be killed and raped, while prosecutors strip and jail anyone who tries to defend themselves against the soldiers when they arrive. They laugh and smile as they hold our hands behind our back while the mob, armed by China and funded by the OFA, burns our homes, rapes our daughters and our sons, and walks away with the spoils of war, all the while praised and protected by the Democrats. It won't be on the news much longer. It will be in your foyer. It will be in your restaurants and in your grocery stores and your banks. We can stop this war before it spills out of the Battle of Portland. All you have to do is vote all the Democrats out of office in November. All of them. Mayors, governors, judges, congressmen, senators. I don't care what you replace them with. Libertarians, Tea Party, Green, Constitutional, or Liberty Party. We can still have two parties. But the Democrat reign of blood and horror that has lasted since their founding in 1848 must end in November of 2020. They slaughtered 1 million Americans in the first Civil War. In God's name, please do not let them start another one. By the way, there was an executive order today President Trump signed banning online censorship. I'll give you the highlights. As a result, these platforms function in many ways as a 21st century equivalent of the public square. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube wield immense, if not unprecedented power to shape the interpretation of public events, to censor, delete, or disappear information, and to control what people see or do not see. As president, I have made clear my commitment to free and open debate on the internet. Such debate is just as important online as it is in our universities, our town halls, and our homes. It is essential to sustaining our democracy. Online platforms are engaging in selective censorship that is harming our national discourse. Tens of thousands of Americans have reported, among other troubling behaviors, online platforms flagging content as inappropriate, even though it does not violate any stated terms of service, making unannounced and unexplained changes to company policies that have the effect of disfavoring certain viewpoints and deleting content and entire accounts with no warning, no rationale, and no recourse. Skipping down, one United States company, for example, created a search engine for the Chinese Communist Party that would have blacklisted searches for things like human rights. It hid data unfavorable to the Chinese Communist Party and tracked users determined appropriate for surveillance. This is the executive order that's going to stop that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in my notes if you want it. I have a form on my website. Go to americafreeradio.com, click on the contact, request it by form, and I will send my notes to you directly by email. Happy to do it. Skipping down, it says, in May of 2019, the White House launched a tech bias reporting tool to allow Americans to report incidents of online censorship. In just weeks, the White House received over 16,000 complaints of online platforms censoring or otherwise taking action against users based on their political viewpoints. The White House will submit such complaints received to the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. It's going to happen. The Federal Trade Commission shall consider taking action as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to prohibit unfair or deceptive acts or practices in affecting commerce. In other words, you can't demonetize people because you don't believe in their politics. Can't do it. That's interference of commerce, violation of the Federal Trade Commission. Section 5 is the state review of unfair or deceptive acts or practices and anti-discrimination laws. Paragraph A says the Attorney General shall establish a working group, I'd like to be part of that, regarding the potential enforcement of state statutes that prohibit online platforms from engaging in unfair or deceptive acts or practices. Paragraph B, the working group shall also collect publicly available information regarding the following: increase scrutiny of users based on the other users they choose to follow or their interactions with other users. Algorithms to suppress content or users based on indications of political alignment or viewpoints. Differential policies allowing for otherwise impermissible behavior when committed by accounts associated with the Chinese Communist Party. This list goes a little bit further. I just wanted to let you know that President Trump was working on it. He was working on it through the Federal Trade Commission and through the Department of Justice. They are very powerful, and they will hold the tech giants accountable. The election starts on Labor Day. I know you're saying, but wait, the election has already started. No, it hasn't. The Democrats don't even have a candidate yet. You see, there have not been enough primary elections to elect and nominate a candidate. Joe Biden is not officially the candidate of the Democrat Party. He has not been voted as such. They haven't had their convention yet. He is the presumed candidate, but he's not the candidate. That's why President Trump hasn't debated him yet. But here's the way the debate's going to go. When the candidate is selected at the Democrat National Convention, which is supposed to be in Milwaukee, we'll see. It'll probably be online. They're all, afraid of meeting together, especially if it's a brokered convention. They wouldn't be able to control a thing. Talk about Portland being a mess. Wait till you see that convention. Oh, would I love to have a seat in the top row of that convention. That would be amazing. I'd have to wear a bicycle helmet and probably body armor, but it would be fun. The point is that when the debates happen, the moderator is not going to ask Joe Biden a tough question. Everything's going to be scripted. I think President Trump should raise his right hand right before the debate ever begins. By the way, I do solemnly swear that I have not received any of these questions in advance. I don't know any question that's going to be asked. I have received and not been briefed on anything that is going to be said by the moderator today. Now I'm going to ask Joe Biden to make the same pledge. Can you do that, sir? That would be the first question. You also know that the moderator is not going to ask a tough question of Joe other than, what time is it, Joe? I mean, like right now, what time? What day is it, Joe? What's your middle name, Joe? These are the questions they're going to get. But it doesn't stop President Trump from asking questions. And I doubt very seriously that President Trump will agree to a debate where he cannot ask questions. In other words, if Joe Biden begins a sentence, well, President Trump this, and finishes the sentence, President Trump could say, wait a minute, he mentioned my name. If he mentioned my name, I have the right of rebuttal. And he does. And that's the thing. Maybe President Trump gets to ask some questions. What do you think? Maybe if President Trump asks the questions, the real Joe Biden will show up. Well, I mean, that's just it. He won't show up. Maybe that's the way the debate should go. Yeah. Zoe, I don't know. She says everywhere will be a mess soon. I don't know. Americans tend toward order. We like to go to the drive-thru and get our order and drive out. We don't like to drive up to Bojangles and see it closed, do we? We don't like to go down to the Planet Fitness and see it closed, do we? We like order. And when 100 million Americans with their debit cards and their Apple Pays and their Amazon Pays and their cash want something, it's going to happen. Somebody is going to defy the governor's order, somebody is going to open, and then another, and then another, and then another, and you cannot arrest a society, to quote Benjamin Franklin. It won't be a mess. I think it's going to be glorious. I think if we can be convinced to not violently defend our property or ourselves, keep it under control, don't be goaded into going into war mode, I think we're going to come out of this okay. I really do. Go out and look for the good in others. Help it to grow a little every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. We'll see you next Sunday right here on X Squared Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.